a neighbor or somebody sitting next to you that's hearing impaired, and she would like to be able to position herself so that she can be of most value to you. So is there anybody here that needs to avail themselves of that service? Well, be sure to name in case somebody comes in at a later date if they have any specific of our service that she can be available. Thank you very much.
Greetings, all. Can I hear in the back of the room? No? I'll speak more loudly. Tell me along the way if my voice goes down and you can't hear, give me a sign and let's back and I'll pick it up. Or anybody else who's speaking tonight. Yes? Okay, I think I can do, well, it is actually on. I think I can do this. I want to greet you. I am the community co-chair of the Restoration Advisory Board, and this is the biggest meeting we've ever had. So there are a lot of new faces here that I don't recognize, so I'll explain a little bit about procedure. What the goal here is tonight, as it is at virtually all the RAB meetings, we call it Restoration Advisory Board is RABs, we call it RAB, is to hear reports from the contractors who have been doing studies about environmental cleanup on Fort Detrick. So the timing of these meetings is based on traditionally when they have something finished or nearly done or enough data collected that they can start talking about it. So we have slightly irregular meetings based on how quickly data are collected and reported. So tonight we have, I think, a milestone in my mind, having followed this for a number of years. And the milestone is that the Area B work plan, remedial investigation work plan, has, I hear, been approved. It's just been approved. We have been hearing about it for a long time, but it finally was approved. I was among the people who reviewed it. I haven't quizzed my fellow RAB members who are sitting here how many of them did read all or part of it, but I read almost the whole thing. And while it is voluminous reading and sometimes slow going, I found it fascinating and helpful because it put in one book at one time sort of a historical perspective, tells what's happened over the years, what's been studied, what the results are, what's been studied, and what now is proposed to finish off the Area B studies and cleanup. So, well, leading to cleanup. So this is a remedial investigation, and under the laws of hazardous waste cleanup in this country, which I won't and can't explain to you entirely, someone else would have to do that, but it is required to be in a stepwise approach. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and at each of those stages, the contractor to the federal agency is required to give reports that tell what they've done to that point. So that's what we're seeing tonight is, I guess, for Shaw, which is the contractor, I think this is their swan song. I think this is their final, right? This is your final big thing to give us, because this is the end of their contract, or very nearly the end of their contract. So their last major deliverable, I think, going out into their contract, was to prepare this Area B remedial investigation work plan. And the Restoration Advisory Board was given the opportunity to read it and comment before it was finalized, and the public is invited to hear about it. So that's going to be our goal tonight, is to hear about that approved work plan. And while I promise you I could not pass a quiz today on it, even though I read it because it was several months ago, it is chock full of detail and useful information that might be of interest to some of you. So I recommend very much that you go to it if you have specific technical questions about how a study would be done or how data would be collected or some such. Is it in the library?
Once we get the final approval letter from EPA, we will be putting that into our administrative record, which is located at Frederick County Library in the Maryland room.
Okay, we heard that. It will be soon in the Maryland room of Seaver Arts Library. So it's available to anyone, and I'm sure you could be given your own little CD of it if you would like to take it home and read it, because it's more than one night by somebody, and I didn't know that. Okay, so it's approved by the Maryland Department of Environment, not yet by EPA. Okay, so that's our main goal here tonight, is to hear the presentation from Shaw about this plan. I recognize, because I've noticed in the paper, there's been all kinds of things in the paper about Fort Detrick. I assume that's why some of you are here tonight, just my guess. And if that is the case, I know you will have, I presume you will have questions and thoughts to share also. For the sake of getting done the job we need to get done, and then everything else that we'd like to get done, I would like to ask that questions, if they concern what's specifically being talked about at the moment, could be asked. But if we can save up questions till nearer the end, because we have a segment at the end where that can happen, that would be most productive, rather than keeping Shaw from finishing by putting us here later than we even have the room. So if you would be respectful of that, I would appreciate it. So I think the next thing to do is the review of prior meetings. Are there any questions of what I have said so far? Yes.
I just have one quick question. Did the community members of the RAB offer normal written comments on the RAB version of the work?
We did individually.
So they're formal and part of the administrative record?
I don't know.
Yes.
And they were.
And that is how a restoration advisory board classically works, is that they are, from my experience with one elsewhere, you're not supposed to, you can individually input, and in fact you are supposed to individually input, and you're not at all required to be a blank voice. That is not an expectation of us. So we might have had divergent views, and that'd be perfectly all right. Probably pretty common. Okay, any other questions about what I said before we move on to the actual agenda? And by the way, the section near the end where it says you get past the Area B groundwater work plan, we get into new business and RAD membership. We do have a few applicants who want to become RAD members, so we'll deal with that here. But that's the good time when we start getting into more questions. So I'm going to open it up at that point, or whoever's in charge at that moment will open it up to any additional questions and comments that you have.
Linda, one thing I want to mention, depending on how quickly we can get through Shaw's presentation, that will actually leave extra time available for the community. So based on talking to Shaw, if they do an hour review of their work plan, we should have at least 45 minutes available for general discussion.
Okay, 45 minutes. And what I'm going to try to do is, because some of the acronyms and the lingo is probably not familiar to you, and we don't want to scare you off with acronyms, I'm going to ask Shaw to try to sometimes explain things, maybe instead of using an acronym all the time. And if I hear something that I think is going to befuddle you, I'll actually interrupt and ask him to explain that if I think it's self-evident to him, but not to the rest of the world. Okay? Now, the next will be the review of prior meeting minutes by Joe Gordon.
Actually, ma'am, we get to the readings, do you want to say that?
No,
Sorry, I didn't do that.
oh, no, that's great. Great. No, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This is really exciting. This is the kind of response that we look for at these meetings. And when we have other meetings about the things that we're doing at Fort Detrick, it is just a heartbeat to see that you're all here. The only way that we can get the word out is when you all do come to these things and you can have your voice heard. So I really, really appreciate that, and for the representation that you are making for your neighbors. And we look forward to having this continued cooperation and involvement in the future. This is good stuff. Thank you very much.
As far as the review from the prior minutes, typically what we have done in the past is we supply copies of the meeting minutes to the RAB members at the next meeting for them to take a look over it, and then they email back us a response to let us know if there's any corrections or adjustments that's necessary in the summary. So I gave each one of the RAB members a copy of the minutes. Please review it, and in the next 2 weeks, send me an email back if you have any comments. Now, to address the time frame between meetings, what we're going to be doing from now on is, as soon as the meeting minutes are available, we're going to be sending that out to the RAB members for them to review. So when it comes time to the next meeting, what we can do is actually get feedback to everybody saying we had no I think their policy, correct me if I'm wrong, they participate in RAD meetings, but they don't want to be considered a member of a RAD board. Is that correct?
I'm Henry Harris. I'm a RAD member, community RAD member.
I'm Gary Poley.
These guys can't hear you. That was Henry Urbis, community rad member.
Henry Urbis, community RAD member.
I'm Gary Poley, also a community rep member. I live on Chookstown Road, just above Area B. And my employer likes me to say, I work for the National Cancer Institute, but I do not represent them. I'm here solely as a private citizen.
Barry Kissen, community member.
Linda Robinson, community member and community co-chair.
And I'm Colonel Judy Robinson. I'm the garrison commander at Fort Detrick, and here in support of what we're doing.
And our name being the same is a total coincidence.
Hi everybody, I'm Bob Craig. I'm the environmental coordinator for the garrison. I'm a governmental member of the RAD.
Good evening, I'm Rob Snyder with the U.S. Army Environmental Command. I'm not a RAD member. I am here representing my coworker, Laurie Haynes, who works as the restoration manager supporting Fort Detrick. And our role in the program is that I work for the program manager for the Army's environmental cleanup program across the nation. Fort Detrick is one installation in that overall program.
I'm John Fairbank. I'm with the Maryland Department of the Environment. I've been involved with Fort Detrick for almost my entire career with the state.
Keith, did you want to stand up and introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is Keith Alcott. I'm a risk assessor with the Army Public Health Command. I review risk assessments for Fort Detrick.
And my name is Joseph Ortfa. I'm the restoration manager here at Fort Detrick for the U.S. Army Garrison. I guess I'm up next. Well, there's going to be quite a few people here we knew that or know that we're going to be here today that don't really have much background on our restoration program. So we wanted to put together just a few brief slides to give a brief history of our Area B. Now we have over 16 years worth of information that I'm going to try to boil down just to a few slides. And in order to do that, we're just going to be giving a few of the highlights. Also, I wanted to give it just a quick update on our capping project. First thing, Fort Detrick Restoration Program, although it started in 1976, it really started in earnest in 1992. We have approximately 43 restoration sites, 28 on Area A, 13 on our Area B, and 2 at our Area C. Now, Area A is our main post. Area B is the property along Chookstown Road, where everybody's probably here of the more interest that they have today. Our Area C is actually along the Monocacy River. That's our water treatment plant and our wastewater treatment plant. Well, as I said, the program began in earnest in 1992. That's when we discovered that we had chlorinated solvents going off post. The Army immediately took actions to protect the local community. We did that by providing alternate water supplies where water mains were available and supplying bottled water to those potentially affected residents.
So forgive me for interrupting, but immediately, I can't continue to listen to immediately. But the problem of potential contamination to Area B was known in the mid-70s. We did not do monitoring wells until 1992. That's not immediate. I just want to make that clear. Continue.
Well, again,
No, the Army didn't have any money set aside for that. That was an Army policy.
Right, it took them
That was a national
It took them
policy.
15 years to gather the money.
Okay, blame Congress on that.
Let's just let it go on.
okay. And the end result, but today we spent over $43 million to date. We spent $26 million on an interim removal action. That's basically where we went out to find the hot spot where the highest contamination was out in Area B, and we removed that. We also just recently completed capping 6 of our disposal areas. So all of our Area B disposal sites, our old disposal sites, have been capped.
That means as of today, we have completed 42 of 43 of our restoration sites. That means they are either at response complete or have the remedy in place.
I'm sorry, Joe, when you talk about this interim removal, it says here that you go back to the prior slide, remove contributing source of groundwater. Now, the part that's never told, not in anywhere, including the Liable Teacher website, is the fact that you got into an interim removal action and you found live human pathogens which cause you to immediately terminate the removal action and at that point have to resort to the capping.
No, that is not correct, Eric.
Let's break it down. Did you or did you not interrupt IRA because of the discovery of live pathogens?
We had a temporary shutdown for a period of weeks, if not about a month or two, until we could reconfigure the site so that we could safely remove the waste from the site.
Do you mind if I read to you from the standard FBI act, which completely contradicts what you said? In early 2002.
Please use the microphone.
I'm reading now from the USAMRIID Final Environmental Impact Statement. Excuse me?
What impact statement?
The final USAMRIID Impact Statement. USAMRIID was a new facility. Okay? And they've got a section here on Area B. All right? So let's look at it. Okay. In early 2002, heat-sealed vials containing live bacteria were discovered in the excavation. Some of the bacteria were identified as being human pathogens. The discovery of the vials led to significant changes in the scope of the project, including additional disposal costs. The IRA was completed, all excavations were backfilled. Now, intrusive investigations in the remaining landfill areas will be minimized due to the discovery of vials containing preserved pathogens during the B11 IRA. There's another place that says, I can find it, that in fact at that point you had only excavated 4 of the parts of B11, and you stopped at that point because of the discovery of the live pathogens.
Well, what you're saying is accurate to certain points. The first thing I would like to point out, the Area B11 project was for 4 chemical waste pits. Chemical waste pits were the hot spot of the contamination. That was completed. And that's what the IRA says, that project was completed. What it went on to say that we were not anticipating doing any more intrusive activities into any of the other landfill sites.
Why not, Joe?
For several different reasons. A lot of it has to do with ensuring safety and also the cost that's involved. The Area B11 project was for approximately 1/10 of an acre. And we had 12 acres of property out there. And let me go on with the presentation here.
Let me just interrupt.
My point is the story's not being told
Wait,
properly.
please.
Or fairly or honestly. That's my point. No, it's not.
Wait a minute. Let's let him please get through his thing. Make note of what you want to bring up in a later time, because we won't get anywhere if we stop on just the history. And I would really wish you would bring up your things.
I'm very sorry, but we've heard the fairy tale over and over and over again.
Not
Okay?
entirely. Not entirely. You are something you say have partial correct information from what I remember.
You know, a half-truth, which is what you're saying a lot, is a whole lie.
Well,
The half-truth was to say that this IRA was completed, we solved the problem, no more contribution to groundwater. That's the half-lie. That's the half-truth.
And listen, does it matter? That happened 9 years ago. It's done. It's done. The state's happy with it. EPA's happy with it. They've signed off on it.
absolutely it matters.
What are you talking about? The EPA, the MDE and EPA struggled for years to get the site.
Wait a minute. Hold on. The trench, or what is it called? Pit 9, Pit 11 removal action was a small piece of Area B. One piece. That one was done. EPA approved it. They were involved with it. The state was involved with it. And it was done.
Get the correct information from this PowerPoint.
It's a matter of, okay, you want to do something? Read the entire reports. He's trying to summarize reports this thick into a few sentences. And guess what? When you take something this thick, you lose the granularity.
I just want to make one other comment. What's being obscured here is the discovery of live pathogens. That's what's being obscured. Okay? It's not in anywhere. They never tell that part of the tale. It's an important part because it changed the strategy of remedying Area B considerably.
Could I ask a question?
there's a difference. If I remember, and I was here, and you were not on the board.
I just read from.
No, I know, but I was here and I didn't read that. Then, if I remember, they found live bacteria. They discovered, they identified other bacteria that was no longer viable that were human pathogens. There's a difference. The live bacteria were not human pathogens, if I remember correctly.
Just to get some clarification here, and perhaps if you let me continue on with the presentation, I can kind of...
Can you say one time?
Yes, sir.
Did you test for dioxin?
That is actually as part of our Area B work plan. We'll be getting that to a little bit later on tonight.
So the answer is no, right?
To this date, we have not tested for a dioxin in the
There you have it.
groundwater.
There you have it.
However, if I may just add, is that when we did our first water testing, we did check for herbicides and the compounds of herbicides, and so that has been part of it, and that will be discussed as we go along tonight.
Did you find 2,4,5-T?
Yes, we do know that we do have 2,4,5-T in the landfills, and we will promise you that we'll get to that. I want to try to get moving forward with this, or we're going to run out of time later on.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, to address some of the concerns that were brought up, we did start the B11 removal, actually. Again, it was to remove the hot spot out there. We can't just go out and remove the entire site. We had to look at the time to remove the hottest area, if you want to call it the hottest area. It's the area with the highest amount of perchloroethylene and trichloroethylene contamination. We began that project in 2001. Shortly thereafter, as it was brought up, we did find some heat-sealed vials of bacteria. They were sealed, and we had them tested. What we did find was they were opportunistic pathogens. In other words, they weren't the threat agents that we looked at here, but if somebody who had a compromised immune system, there's the potential there that somebody could get sick from that. So we immediately reconfigured the site, and this, the point over here, this is the Area B11 project. One of the things that we put in here to be protective of the community, when we reconfigured it, we put in heat filtration on that tent. So all the air that was being drawn into it would pass through heat filtration to protect the community. We also put a lot of engineering controls in place, basically bleaching operations. Every gram of soil that came out of that site went through a decontamination process, and we confirmed that it was decontaminated prior to shipping that down the road. So we went into an extreme amount of engineering controls to reconfigure that site so that we can complete the project. The end result is we did complete the project in 2004. This was only supposed to be a 9-month project, but it turned into basically a 4-year project because of all the reconfiguration that we had to do. At the end of it, we removed approximately 3,500 tons of contaminated soil and waste. Now, what was the end result of that? Well, we had a significant reduction in the groundwater contamination. Specifically, PCE, we saw a 99.8% reduction. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of details on these slides, but basically what they are is a time series. The top slide here is for PCE, the second slide over here is for TCE. In 1999, we had in some locations at the center of our groundwater plume over 200,000 parts per billion. 2005, the end of the project. 2007, 2 years later, you see that we had a significant reduction in groundwater contamination. So we consider the B11 project to be a very successful project. Next slide. Now, we addressed the hotspot. Now we had to look at the rest of the disposal areas which were contributing to the groundwater pollution. Now, one of the things that Barry brought up is why didn't you excavate the other sites? Well, back in 2009, we did a proposed plan and decision document on our disposal sites. We looked at the 2 options: excavation removal for the remaining sites and capping. The excavation removal would take approximately 10 years to complete and cost over $1 billion. Now, that was not just a guess. That was based upon all the processes that we had put in place for that B11 project, which again was only 1/10 of an acre. The other remedy that we're looking at was capping. That would take approximately a little bit over a year in the end, and $6 million to complete. And with that, we reviewed that with the regulators. We wanted to make sure whatever remedy we put in place was protected to the community and could be done in a timely manner.
I noticed that you announced that you'd finished the capping of these landfills.
That is correct.
But from that diagram there, does that only represent about 10% of the area of Area B?
It only represents the, about 10% of the area of B, but that's not what you have to do when you're capping.
I noticed also that the tower, the simulant tower, and the area around that is not included
That is correct.
in the area where the burning pits were. Is that correct?
We have already looked at those areas, but let me continue on and I can get back with that, sir. Because we've got a lot of time
I
to
guess
cover.
my point is this, that if you announce to the public that you finished capping the landfill, that's somewhat misleading, because the areas where Agent Orange was buried and disposed of wasn't just those areas of the landfill. It was over a lot of the area of Area B. And so by saying that the cap is preventing the contaminants leaching into the aquifer, maybe you can comment on that.
I will gladly comment on that. Let me at least start with the landfill caps, and then we can get that and move on to some of the other areas that you're addressing. The areas that you see here in green are our old disposal areas. Now, we went through a lot of work to delineate, to determine where those landfill sites, as regulators here at the table can also attest to. We went through old historical drawings. We did geological surveys out there. We did magnetic surveys. We looked at historical photographs. We did interviews with former employees. And we were able to delineate exactly where those caps were. Or, I'm sorry, exactly where those disposals area were. Now, when you design a cap, I'm just going to move into the next slide here. The area you see down at the bottom here is the waste material. And what a cap is designed to do is to create an impermeable layer above the waste. Now, what this does, in essence, I'm going to just move to the next slide. It's kind of a simplified drawing, but I find that it's quite useful. You can see where the waste material is in the surrounding soil. What we did was we brought in approximately 150,000 tons of common fill to create an umbrella shape over each one of these disposal areas. On top of that, we installed a manufactured low-density polyethylene liner. And I have samples up here if anybody wants to take a look at it afterwards. Now, what this is put over the top for, it's waterproof. So water that would percolate down through the soil above it from rain, from snow, would hit this layer and then shed off the site. In other words, we create that umbrella shape. Now, on top of this was installed, if you can see here, a drainage layer to help facilitate shedding that water. On top of that is a kind of like a felt material which prevents soil from getting down and clogging up this mesh. Now, again, this is constructed like a sandwich. So we have the waste under the ground with the existing cover. We build that umbrella shape over top of it with common fill, plastic liner on top of that, the mesh, the fabric, followed by 18 inches of soil and topsoil. And that's what we just completed with those caps. Now, again, I talked about the most important thing associated with the cap is water management. You're trying to shed that water away. And that's exactly what this drawing up here illustrates. Any water from rain or snow that comes down on top of the caps actually gets shed off and then drops down through the soil on the sides of the caps. Now, again, these caps were engineered, surveyed to ensure that that had the proper coverage over top of it to ensure that none of the water was going down to the waste.
This is actually an REB. This is not, I mean, it's great the public's here and they're here to listen to an REB. Yeah, the REB, the Restoration Advisory, has heard what you're presenting right now at least 4 times.
And the reason why we're doing that is for the community.
But you know what, I've read all this.
Yeah, heard it all.
And it's a tenth of
The
the
question that
area
the
that
gentleman
you're
raised
talking
is the
about.
important thing.
I don't
Very
need to
important.
hear it again.
Very important.
How do we know that the caps are covering everything that needs to be capped?
Right.
How do we know that?
I'll tell you what, let's get to
I have another question.
our main purpose here tonight, I think he was trying to be helpful by giving an introduction to the history because there are new people here. Our main purpose here tonight is to get through Shaw's explanation of the Area B report. That's our biggest goal, and what I think I'm feeling and hearing is that we need to schedule some more meetings that need to go over other things that are, and let this thing happen. Not that you can't ask questions, you can, but we need to let happen what was supposed to be, as you say, the original goal of the meeting tonight, and then respond to the interest in other questions and have some additional get-togethers. It's not my authority to do that, I'm only a citizen.
I think it makes sense.
I have another question.
Yes, sir.
The geology of the site is predominantly limestone, correct?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So in those limestones, there's sinkholes, right? Okay. So you talk about the drainage, but you're only talking about the drainage from controlling the drainage on 10%. But am I right in believing there's a stream that enters from the mountain, disappears into Area B where the waste was dumped, and comes out further downstream to go basically through the neighborhood and then into Frederick? Is that correct?
I don't know that you can say that it's a uniform stream, but I can point to where you're referring to on the map. There's a small spring which enters the property over here that actually does not get to the waste material. It drops down into the ground. Now that spring
in the
is
landfill.
Huh?
In the landfill.
No, it does not do that. It used to, but now it's actually moved upgrading of the site. Goes down to a small hole in the ground. Now this stream or spring is just an intermittent spring. You only see it running every so often. So we're not talking a large body of water. In fact, it's literally about 6 inches wide. That's how much water is going down into the hole. It's not a lot of water.
And the work plan, when we get to that, is to address exactly this karst and groundwater issues. So that's going to be talked about in very much detail tonight. One of the things, if I may, that I would just like to point out is that as Mr. Gorka was just explaining, that the location of these sites and the areas that were capped was done in a very deliberate manner with lots of oversight from other agencies to ensure that we had captured all of the sites and all of the area at Area B that had been in fact used as disposal sites and therefore needed remediation. That is how some of those 42 of those 43 sites were determined, was through that very painstaking process that Mr. Gorka just explained, which was historical documents, interviews, and geological studies, etc. So when we have done these capping projects with the help of MDE and EPA, we are as certain as we can be that we have found the disposal sites, and those are where the remediation took place. The disposal of anything in any of the rest of Area B was not discovered in any of that painstaking investigation. So I hope that helps to explain why you see just those few green areas that you do see up there, because those were painstakingly are derived from all the work we did.
But that's not true, okay? And I'll tell you why. In about 4 days studying this site, and I freely admit I'm new to this, I took a look at some aerial photographs and I talked to some of the residents. And there's a big circle in the 1959 aerial photograph that probably you saw. That was a tower where they tested biochemical agents.
They use SM, which is a surrogate. By and large, they used SM, which I can't remember the long name.
Serratia marcescens.
Was that?
Serratia?
Yes, Serratia marcescens. Which is a bacteria which is a surrogate to evaluate dispersion patterns of bacteria. It was a benign, okay, again, it's probably an opportunistic bacteria, as most bacteria are. I mean, I've been infected with actinomycosis, which you can find practically in anybody's front yard in my sinuses. It's opportunistic. So it was SM. And that was what it was done, that's what it was used for. It was only, there was one other, again, surrogate, but it was not biochemical. It was biological for dispersion purposes. And they used SM and I forgot what the other bacteria was. And that's documented.
Okay. But that's not true either. because we have testimony from people who lived around Area B, and they're talking about burning pits where, where the smoke from the burning pits billowed across the neighborhood. My question is this: was that included in the risk assessment?
The answer is yes. This is only a small portion of the number of the sites on Area B. The center which you're referring to is called Area B Grid. We completed the remedial investigation of that site back in 2001 timeframe, and we were able to close that site out. The burn pits, Area B20 North and Area B20 South, we also investigated those areas, took numerous samples, and closed those sites out. It's not causing any issues.
Analyze the samples for dioxin.
I understand where you're referring to, and that is part of new information that we have, and we're going to be looking into that. Again, I want to get into the...
Is the answer yes or no?
In which way?
Dioxins.
Dioxins, we're going to be looking at, we're going to be taking samples as part
So
of
you've
work
not.
plan. Excuse me?
You have not
Have not what, sir?
tested.
We have not tested for the dioxins. However, we have tested for the pesticides, which is what you're referring to, the 2,4,5-T. We tested many different areas in Area B to see if that is an issue. If you don't see that as an issue, you're probably not going to see the dioxin as an issue either. But we're still taking the position that we're going to go out and confirm that it's not an issue or is an issue and present that information to our Restoration Advisory Board. Next slide here.
May I ask a question? Is everything being recorded right now?
Yes.
We take minutes of everything?
Yes.
It's being recorded by multiple venues tonight.
I can imagine.
Yes, I do. I think is this young lady with you, or are you from?
Actually, all these people.
Okay.
This lady's with Shaw.
So you have it as well as we have it, so, yes.
Well, again, we completed the BLM removal action. We completed the capping of the disposal areas out there. What's left? That leaves our last remaining site, which is our Area B groundwater. Now, the one thing I'll point out, the restoration program is an ongoing program. If we discover information at any point during the time that leads us to believe that there might be another issue or something else out there, we'll do studies to determine if there is a problem, and we may end up creating another site. We just created a few sites for another installation that did not exist before. So it's an ongoing process. We just don't say it's done and it's over with. For example, ongoing process, the landfill caps. Just because we completed putting the liner in place, that doesn't mean we're done with it. We're actually going to be going out and monitoring those caps periodically, several times a year. We're going to be doing 5-year reviews on these caps. As long as the waste is in place, we're going to go back every 5 years to take a look at the remedy to ensure that it's protective of human health and the environment. And if we note that there's any deficiencies, that may prompt us to do additional work. So this is not something that we do something, forget it, walk away, that's the end of it. No, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing review of what we have done to ensure the safety of the public and the environment. Okay, again, we complete the caps. That leaves us with our last restoration site, which is our Area B groundwater site. Yes, sir.
Okay. Just so that I understand.
No one can hear him.
Okay. Just so you understand, just so that I understand, you've spent now.
They still can't hear you. Can you speak to me?
You've spent now what? How many years? How many years in studying Area B?
We began in earnest, if you want to say, back in '92, but we had some original reports back in 1977.
All right. Well, the reports that I got was that there was Agent Orange, Agent Pink, Agent Blue, Agent Purple, developed by Fort Detrick, right, in the 60s and 70s, and that the landfill for Fort Detrick was Area B.
That is correct.
Okay, and that some of the Agent Orange was dumped in Area B. So why, about 15 years ago, wasn't dioxin tested for? And why are we pursuing trichloroethylene and tetrachloroethylene when the big gorilla in the room is dioxin?
Again, we are going to be doing sampling for it. I can't say what has, for reasons it's beyond me, because I was not here at the time, to say exactly all the thought processes were back in the 1990s. More than likely, it was not a concern at the moment because they did not know about the potential dioxin issues. Again, as information is brought to not only the Army but the regulators that could be a problem, we address that issue, we look into it. It's not until more recent that this dioxin question came up. So that's one of the reasons, as part of the work plan, we've been under development for the past 2 years. That's included in part of the work plan.
Just a question about the actual waste that you're containing. How long, do we have a half-life on it? How long does it last? Does it deteriorate, underneath these caps? How long are you going to have to be monitoring this? Is this like decades or?
What we're going to be doing with the landfill caps, as long as waste is present in the ground, we are going to be monitoring the site. We're going to be monitoring the cover itself and also the groundwater out there to ensure that the integrity of the caps remain in place. I can't tell you to a particular compound for a half-life that what you're asking is such a large question that you just cannot answer with just a few words. But that's something that we can talk with you a little bit later. That could take a fair amount of time to talk about some of the possibilities. Under the natural degradation processes, which is actually occurring out there, perchlorethylene gets actually converted into trichloroethylene and then gets converted down into ethane, methane, and eventually basically into innocuous chemicals. So that natural degradation process actually is occurring out in Area B as we speak.
Does it have a half-life? Can you give me a time frame?
I can't begin to give you a half-life.
I guess we don't know.
Depending on the conditions.
But right now you're under anaerobic conditions, and that's degradation.
Well, we're still seeing double MCL above this, right?
Yes.
We're still seeing double MCL above this, right?
Could you speak louder, please? I can't hear you.
The caps have just been finalized. Now that you're not allowing oxygenated water to get into the waste will go anaerobic. Anaerobic conditions are conducive to the degradation of those two solvents.
Okay, thank you.
So not only is it helping to prevent contamination from getting into the groundwater, but it's also help promoting the natural degradation of the waste. Okay, just really quickly, said our last site is our Area B groundwater site. As I mentioned, we've been working with the Maryland Department of Environment and EPA over the last 2 years. We have our conceptual site model, which includes 16 years worth of data and numerous geological and geophysical studies. With that model, we did identify some data gaps, which when we met with the regulators, what we were trying to work on is to develop a work plan that addresses those data gaps and make sure that we're collecting all the information that's needed so that we can complete the remedial investigation out at Area B. Once we complete the remedial investigation, then we can go on to see what remedies are possible to do out there and then implement those remedies. So again, as Linda mentioned, this is part of that stepwise process that we have to follow. We can't jump to the end. We have to follow this legal process that's set before us. Now, in July, just a few weeks ago, we had the regulators that told us, yes, they go ahead with the final version of the work plan. We sent the final documents to the regulators for their letters of concurrence and approval. We just received Maryland Department of the Environment's approval tonight, and we should be getting something soon from EPA in the next couple of weeks. And basically that leads us into Jeff Parks to give the presentation on the Area D work plan.
And Jeff, just before you get started, I'd like to, and I'm going to go stand at the podium so you can all hear me, and I don't have to have my back to you and sit down so I can get to the microphone. So, something that I just would like to make clear to everyone here is that it's very easy to say Fort Detrick and kind of wave your hand and say that this is an amorphous entity that is an uncaring master machine, you know, that moves forward. Remember that it is made up of people.
97% of the people that work at Fort Detrick live outside the fence line. A great number of those people work with me every day, work very closely with me every day. Many of them are a part of the team that are working these issues. Many of those live within the 1 mile radius of Fort Detrick and have lived there and have raised their families there or are raising their families there. So we are an organization of people. We obviously care about ourselves and we care very deeply about our own families. So do these issues concern us? Absolutely. We are here to try to find the best possible answers that we can find as time and science and history allows. Thank God that we live in a country where no entity is an entity unto itself, but instead indeed is an entity that is looked at by multiple other organizations to provide that check and balance so that we can move forward in safety and a concern for our well-being and the people around us. Some of the issues that are being raised tonight fall into the public health realm. They are being actively pursued by the County Public Health Office, the State Public Health Office, and others. Some of the issues that are being discussed tonight fall into the realm of the Maryland Department of Environment and Environmental Protection Agency. I'm very thankful to have all of these people on board. We, as the entity of Fort Detrick, the people that make up Fort Detrick, stand behind all of these folks in readiness to provide any information or to assist in any manner that we can to be able to move projects forward as expeditiously as science will allow and technology. So I just kind of want to make that clear to everybody that that is the framework from which we come. And so as we discuss these things, I think the great feedback that we get, the raising of questions, the raising of issues, are all part of what this process is about. And we welcome those, and we have not ignored anything that has been stated to date or questioned to date. And in fact, those are all within now the realm of those entities that I just spoke about, who are the oversight to the Army and to Fort Detrick. And I just want to thank you all for these questions and for these concerns so that we can move forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay. You're interested in the well-being of those that are around Frederick, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just a couple questions.
Cannot hear you back here.
I'm wondering, you're interested in all those that are around the Frederick area is what you're saying. And I believe with the workers at Fort Detrick, I have over 400 names of people on this list right now that have cancer. Okay, that live in the area of Fort Detrick. 400 names, many of which are here tonight. 4 of those could not make it tonight because they said if they came, they were told that they would lose their job. Is that possible? Is that feasible?
That would certainly not be possible if I knew about it or any of the other senior leaders on post.
On record.
And also, these particular issues of these cancer issues is something that I think, Linda, it's your call, but this is something that falls into the public health realm. And I wanted to thank you. Your organization did get with us today that you are going to be making this data available, and we'll be meeting with you in the next couple of days to discuss that.
Just one last thing.
Right.
I have been calling personally. I've got many of my people here who have been calling personally. We have some astounding, amazing data that will shock this community, that I tried to get with you and I tried to get with Fort Detrick 2 times every day to sit down and talk. And I did not have the courtesy of a phone call back. And then we had a town hall meeting last week, and invited all of Fort Detrick and did not have one person from Fort Detrick show up. Where over 300 of these people that have cancer showed up.
Well, I thank you again for all the information that you have.
Including my
just,
daughter.
just one moment. What we have repeatedly said in terms of the cancer issues is that this is not for Fort Detrick to investigate. This is not for Fort Detrick to actually answer. This is not our area of expertise. This is a public health issue, and we again return you back to them. And as I understand, you are now ready to give them that data, and we will do that. Sit down with you in the next 2
We're not
days.
actually going to do
And
that.
to date, you have not, to my knowledge, given this to the
Well, let me
public
tell you the
health.
reason
Is
we would
that
not.
accurate?
I've called 3 times today to talk to Fort Detrick prior to this meeting and to try to give you the data so that we could sit down and talk so that we could work together. And no one would even take the decency to call us back.
Wait. Who did you call?
Many people. Who was it? Karen? Gary.
That's me.
Okay.
And we are prepared to sit down with you.
No, but Gary, I asked you to meet with us prior to this meeting.
You called us today at 10. Can you meet with us before close of business?
We called weeks ago.
I did not. I talked to Chuck Gordon. Where's Chuck? Is he here? Chuck, how many times have I called you?
We've spoken personally about twice.
And Chuck, how many times have I left messages for you?
Oh, you've left quite a lot of messages.
And you never return my calls.
Mostly your messages are there's going to be a barbecue and a town meeting.
And I invited you.
No, we did get a response from the attorney for Fort Detrick, and we were told there would be no statement from Fort Detrick, and there would be no representation there from Fort Detrick. And so for weeks we have been requesting meetings with Fort Detrick.
And the reason that we were not present again is this is not our issue to be able to answer as the experts in this area.
It may not be your issue to resolve today, okay?
Right.
So maybe other agencies are responsible for that. But it is your issue if you are the ones that were responsible for bringing it into the environment in the first place.
That is what we need to determine. And the people who are best able to determine that are the Public Health Department and in conjunction with the Maryland Department of Environment and the Environmental Protection Agency. I am not going to answer those questions
and we have met with
myself.
We have had calls with the EPA. We have spoken to the Maryland Department of Health. We have done testing, so we have done that.
And we look forward to you sharing those with us and sharing those with the Public Health Department. We do have members of those areas with us tonight, so they are hearing your concern, and we can move forward with that. But if I don't give up this mic, Linda's never going to get through with her meeting tonight.
I appreciate it. We all appreciate that you have, sir, wait a minute. You have many concerns, and I understand. I'm hearing what they are. But what we need to do is not hijack this meeting entirely from its purpose. Let's let that happen and schedule something. I'm confident that we can schedule something instead of continually being interrupted. So, may I please ask if you just wait and schedule something and let this thing go
People are
on?
tired of the dog and pony show right here.
Well, we're here.
They're tired.
We are here
They're
because
dying.
we are
I
the RAD.
buried my daughter 2 years ago.
Sir, I'm sorry for that.
2 years ago.
That isn't why we're here tonight, however.
Oh, that's why I'm here.
I know
That's
that.
why I spent $200,000 to find out what's going on.
I appreciate that, but let's put it in a setting where that's the point of the evening and we can really air it. I would like to ask if the RAD, which is the reason we're here, could just do what it has to do, get that over with so that Shaw can be on their way, and then this.
Shaw needs to be on their way.
And then we can be on with your issues in another setting.
I just have one question.
You always have one question. What is it? Let's go on more.
Okay. We did a preliminary assessment.
Louder, please.
We did a preliminary assessment, which means you look at what happens on a site and you decide what to test for. And dioxin and 2,4,5-T, herbicides and pesticides just spring out at you, okay? That's what the EPA and the Maryland Department of Environment is concerned about. That's what they know. I just want to promise that Fort Detrick will share what else they worked on. Because just as if you don't test for dioxin, you don't find it, we, or they, if it's a state secret, that's fine. Just share it with your fellow federal officials and tell them what else was dumped there, because otherwise you're not going to test, these people in the remedial investigation are not going to test for it, and obviously they won't find it. So if you have developed some exotic herbicide or pesticide or something that you think might have escaped, please tell these people.
I appreciate that was a comment as opposed to, that's a
No,
question.
I'll rephrase
So,
it.
no,
Will you
please don't.
please share it with the federal officials?
Yes, and I'm not at all in favor, I mean, I'm not trying to squelch your thoughts. They need to be expressed and should be. It's just another venue. And could we just let Shaw do their thing?
Please,
and
let them go.
then we'll have the question and answer period after that. And then I think what we ought to do is discuss whatever your next options are. Because the organizations, many of them are here tonight, and they probably could even comment on that. So do we move forward with, we will move forward with the Shaw presentation. Now we will have Jeff Parks of Shaw Engineering.
Hello. I am Jeff Parks. I work with Shaw Environmental. We've been working out here. I've been project manager for Shaw, working with Dorman for the last 4 years. Shaw was the company that installed the caps, and we are the company that wrote the work plan, which I'm here to talk about and give you some idea of what is in it and the planning that's gone into it.
Jeff, just a quick clarification so that people understand. Shaw's portion of the Area B investigation ends with the completion of this work plan, but they actually will be continuing some work out here until I think it's 2014. They're going to be doing monitoring of the caps until that time period. They're going to be doing a fire review. They're also doing some monitoring of some sites on Area A. So they're actually still going to be part coming out to the RABs, but they're going to be a very small portion of it.
Okay. This is the work plan that we developed. It's fairly dense. About half of the appendices are on CD, so it's actually for a printout twice as big, so there's a lot of information, a lot of detail in this report. I'm going to summarize it in a very short time, so I will try to give you the highlights and what we consider the important aspects of this groundwater work plan. A few points. We have received written approval from MDE. We did receive verbal approval from EPA, so when we say it's an approved work plan, that's what we meant. It's basically approved. We are waiting on a final letter, but both agencies have reviewed it and approved it, at least verbally. Another point that was brought up was community comments. We issued the report as a draft report. It goes to the Army, it goes to the regulators, EPA, MDE, and it also goes to RAB. We encourage questions. We received all this are questions from EPA, MDE, and from the RAB. They are part of the work plan. They are responded to and if appropriate, put into the work plan. So there is a chain that you can all follow from inception through all the planning, the comments, to the final product that we have here. A little history, I mean, I'm not sure you want to, we sort of touched on the history here, but they started groundwater investigations in 1977. For the last 2 years, Fort Detrick and EPA and MDE have been working together with technical meetings where each group brings their subject matter experts to discuss the issues and the concerns, and to work out a technical, realistic approach to how to implement this work plan to give us the answers that we need. Again, I did put down final last week. That's when we sent it out and received verbal approval, but it is true we have not received written approval from.
Has the EPA agreed to all of what's going to be tested there?
Yes.
There's no disagreement between EPA and the Army right now as to what's going to be tested.
Correct. That's what took 2 years of discussion. I mean, as y'all know, there's a lot to look for. There's a lot of concerns, and you know, you need to bring in the different groups to determine what is appropriate, what can be looked for, what detection limits it can be found at, and just a lot of the other concerns, which hopefully as we go through this, you'll see how we've addressed those.
Jeff, I don't want to cut you off, but we're going to need to pick up the pace here to get through these slides.
Is an epidemiological study part of that remedial investigation?
No, sir.
That would not be appropriate under these parameters.
Then who is going to do
the public health
the
department?
epidemiological study?
The public health department is already engaged in that.
A quick run through the objectives. That was one of the first things we did as a group, was try to get
was being built. They pumped down, or tried to pump down, Lake Coventry. And what they did was to run down or draw down all the wells in the area. And Lake Coventry only was drawn down 3 feet. So based on that, I guess I'm curious to whether you think that the groundwater in Area B is connected to the wells outside of Area B along Shookstown Road.
There is connection throughout the aquifer. It would be difficult to generally say that's connection is. I mean, I'm not familiar with the pump test, and without reviewing it technically, I would say that there is some interconnection, but that the regional flow is from west to east, for the major flow. But I would, and this is part of the work plan, we are not discounting secondary flow, and that is where this work plan is trying to go from the macroscopic to the microscopic, in a sense of yes, we know regional flow, let's make sure we know secondary flow.
And Joe, when did you do the last eye test?
We did the dye trace test a number of years ago, and the state of Maryland.
And I've had cows go down those holes. I took you over and showed you where the holes were. You can ask him. I showed a lot of guys, there's sinkholes over there, big sinkholes. Never found the cows. They're down in the holes we couldn't find. So it's a bad place to put a dump like that. Here, I got 5 in my family with cancer.
Right.
And they're right beside that place. And what am I going to do about that? You know, we moved away now, but it's a little bit too late. It's like covering up, shutting the barn door after the cows got out. It's not going to work. It seems like nobody really cares about what has happened over there. And well, good connection with Area B and Fort Detrick. They've always been nice to me. I cut hay for the horses, the cows over there. But this is sad times. I just left my daughter. She's in Johns Hopkins. I've been out away from the light.
It's the Public Health Agency.
Is that in Frederick or is it the U.S. Public Health?
Frederick County, that is really the organization that is supposed to deal with and study these things. And it's not supposed to be Fort Detrick who studies public health issues, though they're of course interested, but it's not their job to study it.
Okay, so that's the contact point for all these people. Barbara?
So Fort Detrick is talking about expanding and bringing in, what is it, level B contaminant lab
a spill or something like that that happens, there is a number of regulatory processes that are in place that requires it to be put up the chain of command and out to the public and to MDE. We do regular notifications even on small oil spills on the post. So there is regulatory processes.
Was our farm. I want to tell you, all our farms were condemned. Nobody sold their farm. Then my daddy, when he ended up, he had a meadow. He rented off of some of the farms that they had condemned, part of it. The first part, the second part, in 479 acres, that's what you're all working on, where that land was condemned. And I said then in 1951, we had watched some cows. We had to put up on these other farms. That's the farm next to the grid area. 8 cows in a bull were dead. Came off of that. But nobody comes and tells us what they're going to do. I have lost 12 members of my family with cancer. All from downstream. Where were all these government people then? My husband came to Dietrich 56 to 59, worked on one of your buildings over on the 7th Street farm. He refused to come back to work again. He said, what I heard they were doing there, I want no more part of it. And I want to tell you, any of you people could have come to me. I still live there at Rocky Springs next to that place. And I want to change Hemp Lane to Cancer Lane.
That's right.
All right. Basically, it's the same dog and pony show we've heard before.
This is, we have not heard this. This RAB hasn't.
This is our, hey, by the way, this
Did
is
you
this
hear
is the
what
RAB
this lady
meeting, by
said?
the way.
11 members of her family have died.
Please let me have this meeting, and then we'll let you have another meeting, and I'll come.
What?
We were
You were invited last week?
I wasn't here.
Oh, you weren't here?
I wasn't invited.
And would you please march through this?
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Okay, it's just that I would like to know in your study, did you just do Area B, or did you do the property of Fort Detrick, perhaps along the fence? That's it, that was my question.
We have looked outside the fence, and this work plan does address areas outside the fence of Area B.
Okay, for Clover Hill 1, I put this.
Pardon?
Clover Hill 1.
That's north, is that north, I believe? Yeah. We are not looking that far.
Did you check the incinerator right outside Clover Hill?
No.
That's it. It should be put on the NPL list, is it? It's not? Sure should be.
The reason we didn't look at Clover Hill, if I can speak quickly, is that they did, as they were building that community, when they put in their drinking water wells, they did a series of pump tests, and they determined and told the Army that they did not see any influence further reaching from their pumping, reaching down to Fort Detrick, so that it was felt that there was not connection, that Clover Hill was far enough away and it's north with basically groundwater flowing east, west to east, that they weren't connected.
Who did that testing?
Clover Hill, the company that's the builders.
The people that are pulling off the
Is
house.
that pumping of one well and monitoring it in another?
I do not have that information with
Or
me.
was it the real situation where you have now maybe 300 wells pumping? Think about it. You have 300 wells pumping and nothing counter it on one side. You have probably changed the direction of groundwater flow just by putting in those 300 wells.
May I just say something really quickly?
Look at the Clover Hill. On the front of every house, there's a well that pumps.
Yeah, the Clover Hill 1 development has individual wells. Clover Hill 2 has a municipal type well, and that's where they did the pump test in terms of the zone of influence. That documentation is actually on MDE's website for the pump test on that.
So is that
We
one
have
or two?
tested the wells along that area up there numerous times, and we have not seen any contamination on the site.
What
In addition,
did you
because
test it for?
we tested for volatile organic compounds, and with that, we have not seen any of the contamination that we see on
What else?
volatile organic compounds. That was the main contaminant
Just
of concern.
volatile organics?
Yes.
What do you think was developed inside of Fort Detrick?
There was, excuse me, there were no, some wells on Fort Detrick that had volatile contaminations. If you didn't see the volatiles come from Fort Detrick, then probably probably nothing else traveled either. There probably is no connection. Listen, I'm one of those guys that says you can never say anything is 100% because you never know that. So when I say probably, it's like 99.999%. It's virtually, the reason that was said was because we had volatiles on Fort Detrick around building, 567 or whatever it was. We knew that, and that's where most of the research happened, or further away, so that if anything was detected, or if the fact that nothing was detected in that well, that things at lower concentration would probably not be dragged up either.
We just need to talk about the risk assessment and what chemicals you will test for now, because I think basically volatile organics just